Writer's Digest is a huge brand. We have a very vibrant website. We have an online university. We have a webinar program. We have a book line. We have online editors you can hire. So I have a little bit of input in everything, but the bulk of my job is actually editor-in-chief of the magazine.
Isn't it interesting? And I get a couple of magazines that I look forward to, yours being the highest on that list. I cannot wait for Writer's Digest to come in, and I just find it interesting in this digital age. And you did mention the brand of Writer's Digest is bigger than the magazine. I mean, it's broader, it's deeply woven into the web. I get it. But my thing is still holding that magazine when it comes in, going first to the editor's letter, reading your letter, and then moving forward through the rest of the magazine. Obviously, I'm not alone. Is it interesting to you that we still out there want to consume this physical product that we get in the mail or on the newsstand?
Well, it's keeping me in a job, so it's very interesting to me. I think, the magazine industry is still alive and well, but I think particularly since we are serving writers, I think writers, even more than the average person, usually were first readers, and so really kind of like that tactile paper in their hands. And I hope continue to for some time.
You can imagine the challenge that I've got, because I'm talking to somebody that I'm a fan of. I'm talking to somebody that I love your work. I love the magazine. Your new novel coming out, Almost Missed You. From what I can tell already, it's going to be a smash hit. I think you're awesome. I think you're a huge success. But I got this challenge. It's what to ask you. And so I recognize, though, that you're in the same boat. So you interview a lot of authors. And I wonder, well, recently in your most recent magazine, you quote Jesse Kellerman as saying his parents, who are both very successful and accomplished writers, get tired of being asked the same questions. So, Jessica, I'll put that question to you. Is it ever present in your mind when you're interviewing authors that you've got to come up with like a unique question versus where do you get your ideas?
Always, especially since we are doing interviews particularly for other people who aspire to be writers or who are working writers. Usually the first thing I do preparing for an interview is read every interview I can find with that writer and then try to figure out what on earth is left to ask. Although, I mean, if you have to remember too that you're introducing some of your readers to a new writer that they might not already be familiar with. So with that in mind, you do still have to sort of cover the bases to give them a flavor for what's going on. You don't want to only ask people, obscure, out in left field questions. But I think what's great about the interviews in Writer's Digest is that we really dive into the craft and what makes these writers tick. I think a lot of times when they get interviewed by local newspapers or more general interest glossy magazines or radio shows, usually they're being interviewed by someone who hasn't even read their book, kind of knows what it said on the back copy, and just asks them whatever pops in their head to ask a writer. Where do you get your ideas? And what time of day do you write? And gosh, I didn't see that twist coming in chapter 5. Whereas our interviews, as you know, really kind of delve into the craft of writing, and which is not always, glamorous, how they stay motivated and but how you execute a successful plot twist. So I think actually our interviews probably would have more general appeal to people who wouldn't typically read the magazines too, just because one time I was interviewing this British author, Chris Cleave, and we're not widely distributed in the UK, and I don't think that he had really gotten the memo. I don't think he really even knew what our interview was for. And we're halfway through the interview, and he said, well, this is amazing. You're asking me about my process. It's like you want to know about my process. And you could tell he was having fun to be engaged with someone who had read his work and was actually talking about, what goes into it, which is a lot of heart and blood, sweat, and tears. So the interviews are great fun to do. And I think by nature, they're a little bit different than what you'd find elsewhere. But yeah, it is a challenge, especially with some of these writers who've been writing for, 20 years and putting out a book a year or 2 books a year.
It seems like they've answered every possible question ever conceived at some point in their career. But Yeah, no, you do an excellent job. I say you're one of the absolute best in interviewing. Let me ask you this.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Jessica Strawser, who recognized you? Who do you first remember, or who do you recollect recognized you as having potential as a writer?
Oh my goodness. Who first recognized me as having potential as a writer? I won a writing contest when I was in elementary school. So that might have been the first time. I actually remember, I don't know if it was part of my prize, but I remember going to a writing summer camp day. And it was just kids who were interested in writing, and they all went to this building, and there were all these great exercises. And I got this button from my jean jacket that said, "I heart writing." And I had it on my little denim jean jacket back in the 80s. And I still have that. I don't have my jean jacket anymore, but I still have the I heart writing button. So I guess it was early, although, I don't know how much writing potential I had as a third grader, but
You won the contest. I'd say you had some. What about your family? Were they supportive?
I won the contest. It was oh, absolutely. But I mean, my parents have always been, I was always a good student, and so they were always very supportive of saying I could always be whatever I wanted to be. And then when I chose a career that pays nothing, they didn't discourage me from that either. And I don't know if I should thank them or. But I mean, I really went out I studied journalism. Certainly never went to school to study fiction writing, and journalism struck me as a much more stable path at the time.
That's interesting. What did you take as you look back on journalism school and what you got there? What influence from journalism school do you see in your novels, if any?
I mean, there's a lot of influence from Writer's Digest, and when I went to journalism school, it was specifically for magazine editing. I went to the excellent EW Scripps School of Journalism at Ohio University, and I was they have a magazine track there, so I was a magazine major. And so I got a job with Writer's Digest straight out of school. And then I actually ended up leaving for a few years and doing other things. I edited for book imprints. I worked in marketing and public relations for a while. And I ended up coming back to Writer's Digest. And I think through working at Writer's Digest, I really kind of fell in love with our content and fell in love with writing. And I don't think you can edit tips for fiction writers all day long without kind of wanting to try them out yourself. So maybe if I had landed somewhere, I've always been a voracious reader of fiction, but maybe if I had landed somewhere else, it wouldn't have turned out the way that it did, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Almost missed your new novel from St. Martin's Press. You, in the, it says here, by day, Jessica Strawser is the editorial director of Writer's Digest magazine. By night, she's a fiction writer, and by the minute, she's a proud wife and mom to two super sweet and super young kids in Cincinnati, Ohio. Talk to me about that by night part. How do you get it accomplished? Because I know that's probably a very cliche question, but I mean, how on earth do you accomplish everything that you do, including getting all of these words down and a book ready to publish and manage everything else you're doing at home?
Yeah, it's hard. I will say it's getting harder because now I have this book coming out to promote, but then I also have another book deadline. I have another book coming out next year. So I probably have never been juggling as many balls as I am now. But people ask that all the time, and I think it's just if you're really committed and you want to get something done, you will find a way to get it done. But yeah, I try really hard not to take any more time away from my kiddos than I already do for my day job. So generally, I write after they are in bed, and I generally write about 5 or 6 days a week, and I try not to do too much on weekends. Right now, that's not really possible because I have too many deadlines going on. I have a revision deadline for my next novel next month, so I have been having to take some time on the weekends, but I think everyone who tries to pursue something in addition to a full-time career and a family makes some kind of sacrifices. And so you just have to decide what those sacrifices are going to be for you. And for me, it seems to be sleep. So we'll see. We'll see how long I can sustain that. But I'm managing right now.
Been playing with this idea lately of, and I do not know why, but I've been kind of obsessed with Vincent van Gogh of late, and not his work as much as the idea of, and he wasn't alone, Gauguin and other artists that are just totally unrecognized in their own time. And so I've coined this little thing I call the Vincent principle, which is to create your art in the dark, divorced from the outcome. And I think, okay, Jessica, if no one was going to read a word you wrote, and you knew it, you were sure that no one was going to read a single word you wrote, would you write anyway?
I actually did feel fairly sure that no one was going to read a single word that I wrote for the first several years that I was working on it. When I started fiction writing, it was probably when I started really seriously doing it, it was about 8 or 9 years ago, and I was doing it largely in the closet. And then I was doing it literally in the closet after I had my daughter and her crib took up our last space. I literally put my desk in my walk-in closet. But for me especially, I was very hesitant about showing my writing to anybody because I felt as if I was going to be judged at a different standard. Like, oh, well, here's something from the editor of Writer's Digest. Gosh, I wonder what this is. And like we talked about, I went to journalism school. I didn't go to school to be a fiction writer. My fiction writing training is reading the magazine, reading lots of books about writing, and reading a lot of fiction. So I wrote for the first several years just basically to see if I could do it for myself. And it only evolved into eventually me thinking at one point, maybe I'm onto something here, and maybe I can get up the nerve to show this to somebody. And see if anybody else thinks it's worth reading. So yes, I would. Maybe not at the same pace. Maybe I would sleep more and write a little bit less.
Right.
But yes, I would write no matter what. Absolutely.
Your new novel, Almost Missed You. Why did you write this book? What compelled you to write this? And now?
I really was kind of playing with the idea that we have in our culture of kind of everyone having this soulmate or this perfect match, and the idea that something is meant to be. I am a fan of the popular Dear Sugar column on the Rumpus, and there's a podcast now. It used to be written by Cheryl Strayed, and now it's written by Steve Almond. And I was listening to their podcast, and they were saying that the number one type of reader letter that they get, Dear Sugar, for anyone who's not familiar, is people who write in with their problems. And it's just an advice column. People write in with any kind of problem, and these really super talented writers will answer you and try to give you some advice. And they were saying, and it's immensely popular, and they were saying the number one topic that people write in about is just this angst over if the way their relationship is working out is what's meant to be, or if maybe it should have been a different way, and there's this idea of the one that got away. And we place a lot of emphasis on the role of fate in our relationships. You could go to a golden anniversary party and people would still be asking these people, how did you meet? When really that could be, the least significant thing that's happened in their 50 years of marriage. So I kind of started playing with that idea and thought, what if there is this couple that everyone thinks is the perfect couple? They have the perfect story of how they met. There's no question that it was fate. They had years of these near misses and misconnections, and then they finally ended up together. What if that story is not what everybody thinks it is? And in fact, what if even the people in the couple don't know fully that story is not what everybody thinks it is? So I kind of started playing with that idea, and that was the seed that Almost Missed You grew from.
That's fascinating. I love that. I love the whole concept of this idea that has grown into what's going to be a very, very well-received book, no doubt, when it's released on the 28th of March, 2017. During the writing process for you and what you're writing for yourself and your fiction work, at what point do you hand it to your husband and say, "Hey, read this. See what you think of this"?
Only at the very, very end. Yeah, when I have a finished first draft, I will hand it to him. But I'm constantly obsessing over things and reworking things. Until I have a finished draft, I might be changing it. And my husband tends to be kind of a slower reader, so a lot of times what was happening was I would give him something to read, and then he'd say, "Okay, well, I got to chapter 5, and you could change." And I'd be like, "Oh, I've already rewritten chapter 5." Like, your version of chapter 5 is no longer the version of chapter 5 that's in the final manuscript. So it's better if I wait until I'm done. I don't like to show things to people in progress. I wait until I have a draft that I feel really, really good about, or sort of good about, not embarrassed to show somebody at least. And to the point where I feel like feedback would actually be helpful and wouldn't impede what I was trying to set out to do in the first place. So I have a really solid, not a first draft, usually a second draft. That's when I'll get feedback. And then I'll take the feedback and rewrite some more.
Anything I've missed? Is there anything that you would have asked you at this point that I haven't?
No, I don't think so. This has been great. This has been a lot of fun.
The website is jessicastrawser.com, Twitter @JessicaStrawser, on sale everywhere. Almost Missed You, a novel by Jessica Strawser, available everywhere as of the 28th of March, 2017. And of course, every other month in your mailbox or on the newsstand, Writer's Digest. Fantastic. And your work is really, really terrific. So thank you for being here on Top of the World with me today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.